Welcome along today. My name's Christy Spire. I'm the team leader of nature education here at Green Adelaide, and you're with us for another session. I'd like to start today's session by acknowledging this land that we're meeting on today, Ngadlul Tumpanthi, Ngadlul Gana Yatanga Imparenti, which means that we acknowledge that we meet on the land of the Gana people, and we acknowledge and respect the connection that they hold with their land, borders and community, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And look at that wonderful Ghana shield on a local tree. And yeah, acknowledging today, if you're here in Adelaide, that we're definitely respecting the waters and the rain that is falling on the earth today. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you can acknowledge the country that you might be coming to us from today. So today is the 6th instalment of our seminar series for 2025, which we're running to help share the great work that is happening right across Adelaide to make it cooler, greener, wilder and more climate resilient. This session is being recorded and will be available on the Green Adelaide YouTube channel, so you can spruik it with your friends and family and networks that didn't make it today. So today's session is a webinar, so you don't get the microphone, unfortunately. We're giving that solely to Dr. Julie Schofield today, but you are invited to ask questions at any time by putting them into the chat, and we will answer as many of these as we can at the end of the session. And if we can't, we'll get back to you via email afterwards. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Julie Schofield, a passionate ecologist with over 20 years of experience working in the grasslands of South Australia's mid-north. Julie's journey began as a threatened fauna ecologist in Clare, where she focused on the conservation of the beautiful and elusive pygmy blue-tongued lizard. Her PhD research led her deep into the world of irongrass natural temperate grasslands, one of the most threatened and underappreciated ecosystems in Australia. Over the years, Julie has worked on a range of threatened species and ecological communities. Today, she's a senior landscape officer with Green Adelaide, and we're very happy to have her, where she collaborates closely with land managers to control pest species, restore diversity, and what she enjoys most, connect people with the plants and animals on their land. She's someone who truly loves talking about native flora and fauna and empowering others to care about and protect them too. So today's session, the vital importance of Adelaide's native grasslands. They may seem like a simple landscape, but they are rich, complex ecosystems, home to a wide variety of species found nowhere else. With less than 1% remaining across Greater Adelaide, they're also among our most endangered environments. And so in this session, Julie will help us understand what defines a native grassland, why they matter, and what we can all do to help ensure they survive. So thank you so much to Julie for the session today. I will stop sharing and allow you to take the reins.
Thank you, Christy. What an amazing introduction. I've been really looking forward to this talk. And oh, look at that, my slide works already. You can see the main page.
Brilliant. Yes, can see all the slides. Well done.
Oh, can I see all the slides? There we go. Excellent. So yes, as Christy said, I'm going to be talking about grasslands. I'm going to give you an overview of what can be found in grasslands, some of the cool critters and plants and animals. And what my aim is today is to really get you to fall in love with grasslands as much as I have, and then help you see some of the challenges and threats to these grasslands, because most people don't actually know what a grassland is. So when I'm talking about grasslands, I'm not talking about this. This is a grass, it's a lawn, but it's not a grassland. Grasslands are far, far more rich and diverse. So this photo here, and I guess I should say, I spent a lot of time in grasslands, but apparently I haven't spent a lot of time photographing grasslands. So I've learned a lot about grasslands, and I've stolen some of the pictures of the people that I've learned about grasslands from. So I'd just like to acknowledge Jean Turner, Adrian Shackley, Nicola Barnes, Millie Nichols, and Anne Prescott, because a lot of their photos will be turning up in my talk. I tend to play in the summer where there's not many cute plants happening. So this is Makota. It's the one and only dedicated conservation park conserving grasslands in South Australia. It was dedicated back in the 90s, and it is found up near Burraway, and it's an irongrass temperate natural grassland. And it might not look like it, but in this grassland, it's conserving over 150 species of different plants. So grasslands can be just as biodiverse as jungles, only much, much, much shorter. So, you know, they're in a 30 centimetre range instead of a 30-metre range of vegetation in height. So what is a grassland? Obviously, it has grasses in it. And I guess just to take a step back, we'll talk about how we define vegetation. So when we're giving names to different vegetation types, we often talk about the different layers of vegetation. So the upper story, the middle story, and the ground story. So that's why you might have a stringy bark woodland. So in this case, we have a grassland, that's the tallest story, maybe with a herbaceous middle layer, and then I don't even know what would be in the herb understory. So grasslands, the top story is grasses. But they're more than just grasses, and they're more than just one grass. So you can see in this photo here, there's at least 3 different species of native grasses. The white puffy one is a Stipa australis. No, it's the floaty one. Oh, the name escapes me. Anyway, there is also a wallaby grass in the front and spear grasses in the back, as well as wild oats, because wild oats and weeds are also through our native grasslands, but that doesn't make them any less rich or exciting. We also have shrubs in the grassland, but usually we don't have many shrubs, and often they make up less than 5% of that grassland area. Or the grasslands are a component of that shrubby overstory. So, for example, we have a Mariana A filler shrubland up in the northern parts of Adelaide, sort of Gawler to Wells area. And that's a really important vegetation community that has grasslands as an understory. So grasslands can be an important ecological community in their own right, but they also can be an important understory for other communities. But it is worth recognising that grasslands are very important in their own right and worth protecting in their own right. So this is an example of the Mariana shrubland up north. It doesn't look like much, but you can see that those shrubs dotted throughout the landscape. And even though it doesn't look like much, it's very diverse, and it's an important habitat for things like the white-winged fairy wrens that you don't necessarily get in the denser wooded vegetation. Grasslands often have an irongrass species in it, so a Lomandra species. This is Lomandra multidura, and that's typical of the irongrass temperate native grasslands. And it's not actually a grass, it's actually a lily species, but it's called irongrass because the leaves for most of the Lomandra species are quite thick, and they feel a little bit like a cardboard. But they also have beautiful smelling flowers. So if you're out in the spring and it's not windy, you can definitely smell the lomandras in the landscape. They also have a range of perennial herbs. So that's herbs that the green part of the plant is growing all year round, and then it will flower with these pretty flowers during springtime. And then my favourites, they're annual little epiphytes. And this is where a lot of the diversity of grasslands come in. And it's really where you have to get down on your hands and knees and look for them. They're less than a centimetre in height, so between 1 and 3 centimetres in height, and they're really cool, diverse, unique range of little species. And there's another online talk by Professor John Morgan from the Grassy Plains Network. He talks about the inch-high flora, and it's a really fantastic talk. You should go and have a look at it because he's super enthusiastic, and he takes you through a whole range of these species, which are found in the Victorian grasslands, but a lot of grasslands have similar species that form similar functions across the range, even if they're not the exact same composition. And then the other thing that I haven't mentioned in my slides, but is equally important is, and it's a bit hard to represent and see, but the soil crust and the biological layer of lichens, mosses, little bacteria that are equally important in grasslands. And they often are the spaces where all of those little micro ephemerals grow up in. And these soil layers play an important role in stopping erosion and holding the soil together, but also allowing water to penetrate into the grassy ecosystems. So really in a grassland, you have a whole range of different height plants, and some of them have really long roots like the grasses. Some of them have bulbs that just pop up in the springtime, but they all allow a channel for the nutrients and the water to go into the soil profile, and then that supports a whole range of soil critters that improve the soil health and fertility, and also the way that the water can be absorbed and travel through the soil profile. So if you have all this root system and these little small microorganisms, then you have it's much healthier than, say, just a hard packed area of clay or soil. So you have the different height structures. You have the tall grasses, the medium-sized plants, the open areas where these little inch-high flora occur. And so it's quite changeable over space in grasslands. They are not uniform. They're very patchy, but they're also not uniform over the seasons. So across the landscape, they change, and across the seasons, they change. So in the winter, you have your see-through grasses, which is the way that the grass photosynthesizes. And these see-through grasses include stiper and wallaby grass. They start growing in winter. In the early spring, you start getting your perennial plants flowering, your herbs coming up, and the winter grasses will start flowering and dropping seed. And then towards the mid and end of spring, you'll get your summer grasses starting to kick off and start growing, and they'll be putting up green shoots. And while they're putting up the green shoots, the flowers will start dying off. Things will start getting a bit drier, a bit warmer. The summer grasses will put up their seed heads, and there'll be less to see in the grasslands in terms of plants, but some of your animals and insects will start becoming more active as the heat of the season increases. And I've shown you lots of good looking pictures of grasslands, but we can't be beautiful all of the time. Everyone has their downtimes, and so do grasslands, which doesn't mean they're not important, they're not valuable, and they still don't have all of these important things just hiding, waiting for the next season when they can pop up and start doing their thing again. And when your grasslands start looking like this, it's a really good time to start going out and looking for things like day-flying moths, cicadas, and some of your reptile species in the grasslands. So that's given you a broad idea about what the structure of a grassland is and how it changes over time. And now I'm just going to talk to you about some of the cool plants, and because there are over 150, I'm not going to go through all of them. I feel like I'm already cramming a lot of things in this talk, so you're really going to have to buckle in and hang on. But there's, like I said, there was a diversity of plants across grasslands, and really our grasslands in the Adelaide Hills are much different from those that you'll find in the mid-north, and even those that you'll find in the southeast. And within the Adelaide Plains, there would have been a range or a diversity of different types of grasslands that would have some of the same species, but different ways of being organised or different compositions of them. And this is just an example of some of the ones that have been seen in the Adelaide Plains and we might expect to see, but we don't really know what grassland compositions we had in the Adelaide Plains historically. We have some records of some of the species and how beautiful they were and how tall they were up to the height of a cart, but we don't have good records of what was there, because a lot of it was cleared or used early. When you come to grasslands, there's obviously this nice open space that you don't have to do anything to. So you can put your sheep on, or you can build your house on, or you can start using it immediately, which means it was changed, and a lot of the grasslands were in the flat, fertile areas. So they were lost early on. But here are some of the plant species that Green Adelaide has been working on, or some of the cool species that we've got in our grasslands. So on the top left is the blue devil, Orangium ovatum. It's a nice green plant, and it's quite soft and grows up. And then as it matures and ripens, it gets these blue spiky burrs on them, which used to get caught, or still do get caught, in sheep's wool. So that's why it's called blue devil, because it's a bit of a bother to remove out of the sheep's fleece. Down the bottom is the Wallenbergia. It's one of the native bluebells. There's a whole range of native bluebells that we find in grasslands and in grassy woodlands. In the middle is one of my favourites in a grassland. It's the Goodenia. It has the yellow 5-petaled flower. It's kind of a little bit like a hand. And I picked this one out because it has a really cool leaf shape. It's pinnate leaf shape, so it's Goodenia pinnata fidea. And that's quite common in the region. The Orangium is endangered. The blue devil is endangered in our region. The Wallenbergias, it depends on the species, but they're mostly common. The bottom right is one of the Tylotus erubescens. They're rare within the Green Adelaide region, but they're just so cute. They're little puffs of puffiness that have a little pink stripe in them that you will often find when you're walking through grasslands. Grasslands also have a lot of orchids associated with them. In the top right, we have the Diurus berrii, which bears cowslip orchid. Unfortunately, this is extinct in the region at the moment, but who knows, if we restore more of our grasslands, there may be an opportunity to return them back into the region. And I guess the top one that I've got is the Austral forget-me-not, forgot its name, which is similar to the European forget-me-nots, in the same family. And the European forget-me-nots have a little yellow ring around their flower in the centre, so that when insects come in and drink the nectar, the yellow ring turns white, so that other insects know not to visit that flower. I don't know if our Australian one does the same thing. Perhaps someone can tell me. But it's also good to remember that we have native species that look very similar to introduced species. So when you're out in your grasslands, it's very important to really make sure you identify what species you're looking at, because there are some non-native lookalikes. In our grasslands, a lot of species that are tasty get lost early, especially if they're used for grazing. And a lot of the pea families seem to be quite tasty to sheep and cattle. So I've included some of those. In the top left is the Bear's Swenson pea, Swansonia berrianum. And in the bottom left is Cullen parvum, the small scurf pea. And they are both beautiful purple flowers, and really important in grasslands, and where Green Adelaide is working to introduce them back into grassy woodlands and also grasslands. In the bottom left is a rarer grass. It's the red-legged grass, Bothria cloa macra, and the stalks of that grass are this really pretty red colour. In the middle top is some of the daisies. There's a whole range of daisies that we're looking to get back into the grassy woodlands, but this one is button podolepis, and yeah, there's a whole range of these button daisies that are quite important in the grasslands, but have been lost for various reasons. And in the middle is one of the Marianas, which is a chenopod. It's a really small shrub. They don't have flowers. They have these seeds that you can see in the photo that are sort of these paper discs. And there's quite a few small chenopods that are important in the grasslands. So all of these species, oh, I've got the Tylotus in the top. How could I forget? It is a little fluffy, narrow-leafed yellowtail. And you can see examples of these at Makota. For a Tylotus, they're quite big. They're maybe 5 centimeters high, the little fluffy seed heads. And they're just always cute and fluffy to see in grasslands where everything's sort of a bit strappy. That different shapes always brings a smile to my face anyway. So to go with all these plants, they create different niches and opportunities for a whole range of different species. And within grasslands, we have a whole different variety of things, from moths to butterflies to grasshoppers to ants, cicadas, dragonflies, lizards, termites. At one site I've been working at, there was 34 different species of spiders. Not great if you're an arachnophobe, but you really do have to look to find them. And grasslands support species that really like that open, sunny habitat, but also have those safe spots to duck into and hide. And termites are really important in grasslands. They're really great for carbon sequestration. They'll take the dead bits of grass and the root matter and take them down into the soils so that they can be composed and broken down. And ants, there's a whole diversity of different ants that you find in grasslands as well. So they may not look like much at first glance. You may not be able to see all these things, but you really need to stop and look and get down into the grasslands, and you'll see a whole range of different things that you didn't expect. And even birds, there's a suite of birds that are grassland specialists, like some of the quails, the Richard's pipits. Up further north, there's the plains wanderers, which is a really cute endangered bird. You should look that up. So yeah, grasslands are important for a whole range of species that you don't normally find in treed or wooded areas. And if you notice, thinking back to the pictures of the plants that I showed you, most of the plants are white or purple or yellow. And broadly speaking, those sort of colours are more usually insect pollinated species. So in grasslands, they're very important for supporting a whole range of different insects, and the insects are important for supporting those plants. So once you start losing one or the other, it's not a great thing. So I'm going to talk now about some of the critters that we're working on in the Green Adelaide region in terms of trying to bring them back into the landscape or support them. And one of the new species that we've most recently found is the cryptic sun moth. It's a day-flying moth. It used to be found as far east as Melbourne, as far north as Clare, and all through the Adelaide Hills, but now it's only found in Clare, and the Adelaide Hills is a really important stronghold for these moths. And as you can see on the left, they really are quite cryptic. This one's hiding in the middle of the photo. But when they stop and open their wings a bit, you get this really nice flash of orange. And these are grassland specialists. So you only find them in grasslands and sometimes in very open grassy woodlands. So these are some of the habitats that we've been finding them in recently on these roadside reserves, where you can see in the photos, the native grasses are just like those dotted tussocks or those dotted clumps of grasses. And really, because of the encroachment of vegetation, they're limited to these roadside or open areas that are quite well managed and often mown frequently. And we don't know a lot about this species yet. Another cute critter that you're going to find in grasslands is this Flinders Ranges worm lizard. It's not a snake. If you look carefully, you can see the little tiny leg flaps at the back, which are the residual bits of the leg. These are most closely related to geckos. They're in the family Pygopae, and they have a nice little round gecko tongue which they can use to lick their eyelids. But they're again a grassland specialist, and it's especially grasslands that have termites. So these critters mostly spend their time underground, moving through the ant nests and termite nests, eating the larvae. And again, another thing, we don't know much about them because they do spend so much time underground. One of my cool favorites is this Tympanocryptus Peter's dragon. This is a new species. It was split out from a larger group in 2019. No, yeah, 2019. So we don't know a lot about this guy. We thought we knew a lot about that species complex in general, but because it's been split out, it's more of a generalist, and there's not much published information about this guy. And that lives in the northern part of our region, so up from Gawler north, in the grasslands and the open spaces again. But this area also has been flagged for infill development and expansion for Adelaide. So if we want to keep this critter in the region, then we really need to think about conserving the grassland and the open habitats, and maybe not building those houses or building those houses elsewhere. And the last one is well, I don't want to say my favorite, but it's my favorite. It's the pygmy blue-tongued lizard. These are extinct from the Adelaide region. They were named after Adelaide, Teliqua adelaidensis. So we no longer have them here. The southernmost population that's known is Kapunda. But imagine if we could restore our grasslands and get our grasslands into such a state that we could bring these pygmy blue tongues back south into the Green Adelaide region. And, you know, perhaps with climate change, bringing some of these northern species southwards is going to become more important as the climate envelope moves south and the hotter, drier Barra-Soros area climate starts moving towards Adelaide. Then having that habitat set up and those grasslands preserved will allow some of those species to move southwards. So I've told you a bit about what grasslands are, some of the things in grasslands, but where are they in Green Adelaide? So up in front of us, we have a map showing the pre-European vegetation in Green Adelaide. The light green is areas that were mapped as grasslands, and the darker green is areas that are mapped as grassy woodlands. So they would have been open woodlands with a grassy understory. In Green Adelaide, as Christy said, we have less than 1% of our grasslands left, and we have about 7% of our grassy woodlands left. So it's really contracted quite a lot, but this also may be an underestimate. So the accuracy of our maps are only as good as the historic information and the scale that they were drawn at. They're also only as good as how they are now subsequently interpreted. So when we think about a grassy woodland, if you think about a woodland, this is a botanical description of how we describe our different plant communities in South Australia. So if you think about a woodland, it's highlighted in yellow. Across the top is the amount of tree cover, and down the side is the height of the vegetation strata. So woodlands are trees that are between 5 and 30 metres high, but their density or the area they cover is between 10 to 30% of the landscape or less. So that means if we are looking down from above, you would only see 10 to 30% of that landscape covered by trees. And if your brain works in pictures like mine does, this is kind of what it would look like, where the yellow area, the 5 to 25%, would be how much of the ground would be covered by trees in black. So it would really, our woodlands even would have been quite open, more open than what we see today. And our vegetation on the Adelaide Plains and to some extent in the hills is far denser than what it would have been historically. And if you don't believe me from the descriptions, we can go back and have a look at the early settlers, looking at some of their diaries, but also some of the paintings that they did. So this painting was done within 4 years of settlement in the Adelaide Plains region. So they're not going to have time to clear all of that within 4 years. We humans are industrious folk, but likely it's still, close to what it would have been historically. So the plains are really quite open. There's scattered trees, start to get more trees up in the hills, and then you would have got your forested areas in the very wet places. Then there's also this one that again shows the really open plains areas and some areas that would have been treed. And again, another one, again, looking from the Glenelg Plains up towards the hills where the plains are quite open, lots of space for these grassland species, clustered trees, and then getting more treed as you move up into the wetter areas. So I've shown you some really good grasslands and what's in grasslands, but how do you know when you're looking at a grassland? So these images are sort of typical of what you see of a healthy grassland in the Adelaide region. You can see in the rightmost picture, there's iron grasses, the spiky, clumpy looking grasses. And then there's also the tussocks of our native perennial grasses. And so really when you're looking at a grassland, you're looking for those tussocks of perennial grasslands. This is another example of some good healthy grasslands. On the left is some kangaroo grass, some themata. On the right in the back is themata, and then in the front is aristida. And you can see that aristida forms that lumpy sort of gappy texture, which is what I was talking about when you have clumps of grasses, but then the open spaces in between for the herbs and other things to come up. But this is also a native grass. It is in quite poor condition, but it is definitely a native grassland. You can see all of the small little tussocks of native grass. This one's been grazed quite heavily and probably not recommended for a healthy grassland. But you can still see that there's native grasses there. And this is another example of where we've found the day-flying sun moths. This is another grassland. It's a Mariana A filler shrubland, and the grassland would have been in between the shrubs. Again, grazed quite heavily, but there are those grassy remnant components in there. And so this could be restored really quite effectively. Another example of a grassland. So this is why grasslands have been so under-recognised. You look at this and you think that's just a sheep paddock. That's just for grazing. But it does have those really important native grassland components. So it really is worth conserving and restoring, and grasslands can also make really great areas for running stock and cattle. They've done some things in the mid-north, studies in the mid-north where they've looked at rotational grazing, and it does support sheep farming quite effectively. Closer to home, this is in the Adelaide Hills, another example of a grassland. They can be quite weedy. This one has a lot of wild oats in it. It also has some olives running through it. Again, not the beautiful grasslands that I showed you at the very start, but there's opportunities to move them more towards those beautiful grasslands to help reduce the threats and the weed loads and build up those good biodiverse things to get them looking happy and healthy again. Again, another different example. This one's a green grassland. So we do get out there occasionally when they're green, but again, it looks just like a grazing pasture. There's weeds in there. You know, why would we conserve this? It again has Flinders worm lizards in it and some really good grassy components that with a little bit more love and care could be brought back to their former glory. And then the final one, this is again our Mariana shrublands from up in the mid-north. We've got our slightly degraded grassland in the front, and you can see how the grasslands can blend into other communities but still are really important in their own rights. So on to the threats, the sad stuff, why we're having loss and degradation of our grasslands. I guess one of the big challenges is when weedy species come in and they change the structure of the grasslands, when they take it from just a grassy is the highest level to having trees or shrubs that shade out and outcompete that grassland. And olives within the Adelaide Hills are a big threat to grasslands, but so are some of the other weeds such as gazanias. Gazanias are so beautiful, but really not in our grasslands. Or some of the weedy grasses like coolatai, fountain grass, these Texan needlegrass, or Chilean needlegrass, these are introduced tussock grasses that clump and form big mats and outcompete our native grasslands. Historical planting can be one of the degrading factors of our native grasslands. So, you know, maybe someone popped in a tree once a long time ago, thinking that that would be the only tree in the paddock. But over time, it's thrown out babies and it's expanded into the grasslands and taken over those open spaces. Or people love putting in trees and love revegetating, and I get it. It's really exciting when you have this open space and you're like, what can I do with it? But in grasslands, if you put in trees or big shrubs, it really degrades the grasslands. You remove all this open space. You lose all of these small plants and these sun-loving critters. So and there's also been a historic push to put more trees in the landscape. So really that's not the greatest thing if you're doing it in a grassland. There are certainly places and sites that you can do that, but grasslands is not one of them. And then there's also the perceived need to create shade across the urban landscape. Well, it's not a perceived need. We do need more cooler, greener areas. But if you're looking at the heat mapping, and Sarah White gave a really great talk in this seminar series about the urban heat in Adelaide, so I recommend going and having a look. But if you think about the urban heat mapping, trees do cool down these hard, hot surfaces like roads or hard infrastructure. So the heat signature would be roads very hot, trees much cooler, grasslands quite hot during the day. But the important thing for human health is the temperatures overnight. So if you have the capacity to cool down the area overnight and get those temperature drops, is much better for the health of communities, especially when you get the heat wave days. So if you look at the maps at the nighttime signatures, you'll still see these hard surfaces can be quite hot, especially the road surfaces. Trees will hold some heat because of the moisture that they have around them, but they will be cooler than the hard surfaces. And then the grassland areas will cool right down and they'll be much cooler than the trees or the hard surfaces. So yes, trees are important for cooling during the daytime, but grasslands can lose that heat overnight much faster than a tree or a hard surface habitat. So it's really hard surface area. So it's really about thinking where we put our trees, and the trees are really important for cooling down and shading those hard surfaces during the day and making sure they don't reach those heats at night. But our grasslands also play a really important role. So trees in themselves are not bad. It's just thinking about really the situation that you have in front of you, and do you need a tree there, or would it make a greater impact somewhere else in terms of diversity and heat management. The other challenge with grasslands is inappropriate site management. So grasslands do like some sort of disturbance, but if they have too much disturbance, then you can lose species out of them. And if you have too little, then they grow a lot, they create a lot of thatch. You lose all those open spaces and you can start losing species out of them again. And it's the same with the fire. The disturbance is, again, for the vegetation rather than the soil. Soil disturbance in grasslands completely destroys not only the plants, but also all of the ground flora, like your spiders, your ants, your cicadas, your red day moths that their larvae sit under the ground for 3 years. So you don't want to lose them by disturbing the soil, but disturbing of the plant matter can be a good management tool if used appropriately for that site. Walking through a site, if you walk or drive too many times, you start compacting the earth, you start killing off the plants. And spraying inappropriate herbicides or insecticides. Well, we do have a lot of grasses that can look similar to introduced grasses. So in this picture here, you can see where some of the natives have been mistaken for introduced and have accidentally been sprayed out. But there are also a lot of opportunities for our grasslands. They do bounce back relatively well if we can remove some of those threats. And I guess that's what today is about, is getting you understanding that we do have cool stuff in grasslands. They do look a bit shabby if they're not healthy or not at their best, but they are relatively easy to point towards a better trajectory through targeted weed control and appropriate management and reducing the amount of trees and shrubs in them. So I guess my final points are that grasslands are under-recognised. Please go out and tell your friends about grasslands and how wonderful they are. They can be difficult to identify. We do have some resources that we're going to send out that will help you start identifying native grasses and thinking about native grasses. If you are going to visit a grassland or want to restore a grassland, visit your grassland at different times of the year to get an idea of all of the different important species there, because you'll only get the flowers during spring, you'll only get the cicadas during summer. So visit it at different times of the year to get the real impact of all of the things that you do have in your grassy areas. And if you do want to manage one, really think about what you've got, learn what you've got at your site before you decide to change the management. And this includes planting or slashing, because that impact could have far-reaching consequences that you don't really think about at the time. Because it is exciting to try and restore things and bring them back and plant things, but sometimes they just need a slow nudge in the right direction. That's probably enough for me. I've taken you on a bit of a wild ride across so many different areas. So thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I'd love to be able to answer them.
Awesome. Thanks for that ride, Julie. So much to take in. It was fantastic. And yeah, I've got lots of thoughts swirling, but there are a few questions here, so I'll do those first and then jump in with my own. So we've got a Michael here that is a little bit worried about his grasses looking very dry and dead after the hot summer. How do you know if they're really dead, and do you think that in general, sorry, someone's other question came up. Do you think in general that our native grasses will recover okay this winter? And how can he keep encouraging and supporting them?
Yep, that's a great question. So grasses do die off, especially, so we've got our annual grasses, like the wild oats that dry off in summer, and they just die, but our native grasses are mostly perennial. And if you look at the base, again, it's about getting down and on your hands and knees and looking at the base of the grasslands and the grasses and just pulling apart the tussocks to see if there's any green spots after rain. That can give you an idea if it's shooting and bringing back a bit of life, depending on the health of the grass. So native grasses have really long roots often that go down into the soil. And if you cut them at quite close to the ground, then you're really impacting on the grasses, and the roots will stop growing for about 17 days before they start growing again and sending that sugar up to the plant. So depending on how short you cut your grasses will depend on how healthy it is and its ability to bounce back in those drier times. So yeah, just have a look at the grasses, how long they are. Have a look in the tussock base bit for bits of green. They usually do come back quite well, unless they've been cut short for multiple years and have really had that long, hard hammering time of it. In terms of supporting native grasses, if you have a native grass area, making sure that there's spaces that are weed-free around it so that you can encourage it to put out more seeds than the weeds. And this might be through hand pulling weeds or really being targeted on your weeds spraying. So not just a broad blanket spray, but really targeting the weeds that you want to get rid of. Each grassland is different in its management and its challenges. So it's really about understanding what you've got and where you want to take it. But also you can get in contact with us and we can provide you better advice than just a general web presentation.
Fantastic. Awesome. This next question is more about examples or areas. There's two questions that I'm kind of weaving together, but have you got any examples of urban, peri-urban landscaping project or areas that are taking cues from grasslands? Like, so are there some particular projects that people can see in action?
So a lot of councils are now managing their grasslands really well. So if you go to your local council website and Google grasslands, you might be able to find where your local grasslands are. If you want to have a look at a really good restoration project, go have a look at Glenthorne and the things that they're doing there in terms of the grassland restoration. And if you want to see some intact grasslands, Hallett Cove and Merino are quite good examples of coastal grasslands that you can go visit. If you want to go a bit further afield, Makota is a great place to visit in spring, and I would thoroughly recommend popping up there for a day trip. Yeah, but we do have some great examples. Oh, and even the Adelaide parklands, Victoria Park, we have our checkered copper butterflies living in a grassland in the centre of the city. And like, how cool is that?
Yeah, that's an amazing spot to jump to, so close by. Awesome. Yes, great list of examples there, and we'll make sure to share some of those as well so that you can follow those up afterwards. This one's a bit of a follow-up to that one, Julie, in terms of, do you think and is Green Adelaide and councils kind of focused on kind of particular areas across Adelaide that offer really good opportunities for native grassland restoration?
There are so many opportunities for grassland restoration, and I guess in some cases we're not even aware of these sites yet. And there are some sites that we do know of, and they could have the potential to be managed to reduce the weeds, and we're working on that with the cryptic sun moth stuff up in the Adelaide Hills. I'm particularly working around the Skye area, but that's going to extend out. Up near the Gawler area, north of Elizabeth, Two Wells, that whole area has many opportunities for grassland restoration. And then again, a lot of the councils are working hard in their areas undertaking grassland restoration that we being Green Adelaide don't even know about. So if you're working with a council, I'd love to hear about your grassland restorations, because I think it's great.
Fantastic. Oh, this is actually links to that. Your mapping is the grasslands on that agenda for that new northern parklands. Is that what you were referring to in terms of in Elizabeth?
I don't know about the Northern
Not sure.
Parklands in Elizabeth. Yeah.
Yeah, I
but,
think that's still being planned.
it'd
Yeah,
be great
thanks
if
for
it
that.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Thanks, Mel. I'm just going back up to a comment more than a question, but I think it is a good one just to bring up in terms of what you have challenged people on today as well. I think this is from Rachel down at on Kapringa. I think that is a key challenge with the new Greater Adelaide Regional Plan. It has a tree canopy cover target, but not an urban greening or biodiversity one. Trees are only one part of the picture, as you've outlined today. The City of Onkaparinga are working on mapping out grasslands as part of our approach to urban greening and canopy to try to ensure we don't plant trees there. So, and I'm sure there's probably other examples of councils trying to do that as well, Julie.
Yeah, and it's really about choosing the right spaces for the right things, because having those amenity spaces and those green spaces are really important, but saving spaces for our biodiversity is also important too. And maybe we can work towards integrating the two together, where amenity spaces do incorporate more of that biodiversity.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for the great talk. Thanks, Kate. Given grasslands are quite popular for development, I'm assuming she means within housing developments. I'm not sure. Do you have any thoughts on how we can better protect these habitats and raise their profile? Popular for people to develop on top of.
Yeah.
I get what she's saying now. Do you have any thoughts how we can? Yeah, that kind of education piece, I suppose. How we can keep raising the profile.
I mean, I think that is the important thing, is keep raising the profile and getting an understanding of our grasslands and what can be seen as quite an empty spot for grazing or for building your house can have those really important biodiverse values, like this cryptic. I keep going back to the cryptic sun moths, but they're fantastic. But the cryptic sun moths, or these little hidden lizards, or these very important but not obvious and showy plants. So it's really about people being able to recognize that, both the general public, but also at the higher levels of development or surveys, or it'd be really great if we got more legislation around grasslands and more recognition of grasslands generally as a community, rather than that's a patch of native grass. That is a patch of native grass, but it also hosts all these important other values and supports all these important things beyond just that grass.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. And this is also from Mark out at Charles Sturt, great prezzo. I think councils such as mine and staff like me would love some, and I think you've alluded to this, so you may have answered it a little bit, but would love some more guidance about how and when to reintroduce, restore grasslands in our councils. Does such guidance exist? If not, any plans to create this?
Yeah, so there is some broad guidelines from Victoria talking about getting grasslands back in the urban area. But I would suggest that all grasslands are different. Please come and talk to Green Adelaide. We'd love to help you out. And maybe we can develop these guidelines together and make them more targeted at what councils are really looking for. Yeah, but definitely. Yeah, definitely talk to us. Talk to me. I'll start the conversation.
Brilliant. I'm sure Mark will. Awesome. I've got lots of pinging happening down the side here, Julie. Everyone's very engaged, so which is fantastic. So we might not get to you all. Another question. Yeah, is it possible to apply a bussard approach to help address native grasses as part of the development? That was in response to Kate's earlier question around where development happens and how to incorporate bussard into developments. I mean, I think grasslands can definitely be a part of part of Busset when you're looking at the context of where you're designing, because it is just a design approach, isn't it?
Yeah, and definitely grasslands will grow quite readily in areas. They do need a bit of management for the weed loads, but so do all garden beds. And you can support some really interesting butterfly species that aren't reliant on nectar. Well, all butterflies, the caterpillars like to eat green stuff, and grasses certainly supply a diet for some of our caterpillars, and you need the caterpillars to get your butterflies. So yeah, include it in your busset, and it's just there's a diversity of different shapes and structures, which I didn't get into. If you guys would like more grassland talks, hassle Christy and Nat and the ed team for more grassland talks on themes, and we can see what we can do. Yeah.
Definitely. And also great practical request, from Peter, I think that's come out of today. Can a list of grasslands be put together, e.g. Glenthorne, Campbelltown, Wadmore Park, Lochiel Park, see Friends of Lochiel Park website? Yeah, that's a great idea, just so that people can, actually visit and get down into them, like you've been saying, Julie, as well, and to go seasonally to understand these places as well. That's a really great idea. Thanks, Peter. The Port Adelaide Environment Group are currently working with Green Adelaide to restore biodiversity park at Outer Harbour. We'd be very interested in getting some specific advice on an approach to restoring open areas there as well, which is fantastic. And there was a bit of interest around the Makota Conservation Park, but everyone's replied to everyone here, Julie, and they're answering each other's questions, which is great. So just people were interested in reading the management plan for that park, and someone has sent them a link. So
fantastic.
That's but if there was anything else you wanted to say about that particular park, so it sounded like a pretty special one to encourage people to visit.
Yeah, if you have an opportunity, go up and see it in spring. It's really beautiful, and it's a great example of a grassland that's being managed for conservation. Hopefully we'll have some that we can showcase in Adelaide in a couple of years' time. Maybe not conservation parks, but good, happy areas.
Yeah.
And if anyone knows of some great grassland areas, please tell me about them, because I'm new to finding out where the grasslands are in Adelaide, and the more knowledge we can share and the more awareness we can raise is always a good thing.
Fantastic. And we'll get a photographer to go out with you this time, Julie, and capture all the capture all the images that on the go and at those different seasons as well. Will be fantastic. Which leads us into this great comment by Suzanne, that I think there is a big education piece to explain that prior to white settlement, Adelaide had so much grasslands, as we saw in all those painting pictures, and just that challenge of how we re-educate, which I think you've answered as well. But I think, that just helping people, understand what things were like beforehand is a really good challenge for those of us that are involved in education and storytelling out there, and also having some good images, I think, again helps people to re-educate and reimagine what landscapes look like. But I'm sure there's lots of other creative ideas and innovative ways that we can re-educate as well. So not sure if you want to share any now, but
that's a whole another talk that we could get into.
Yes, that's right.
But I can share some imagery from 1949 and compare it with today around some of the grassland areas that we're working on for the sun moth. So I'll include that in the email that we send out, just showing how much more open it was in 1949 compared to what it is now, and some of the challenges that we're now working with. And it's about understanding where we came from, but also thinking about where we want to go to, and really having that considered approach, because we might not be able to ever get back to where we were, but we can get to some good places going forward.
Definitely. And there was just one other question around more for the backyarders and that type of thing, around encouraging putting native grasses into their gardens as well. And so does that kind of smaller approach in people's backyards or front yards, does that help with some of that broader, bigger sized grassland areas as well? I mean, it helps with the education piece. What's your thoughts on that?
I often think a lot about this, and I think it is good if we have patches in people's backyards. It would give species the opportunity perhaps to jump from back, especially I'm thinking more insects rather than some of the lizards and birds, but the opportunity to jump from areas to get to those big patches and just have those small little resources along the way. And if it brings you joy, why not grow them in your back or front yard? I have my front yard, I have native grasses growing, and it always makes me happy to brush against the lemon scented grass or have a look at when my little wallaby grasses are flowering. And this is one thing that I learned from Anne Prescott. If you get the seed of a wallaby grass, and turn it upside down, it looks like a little ballerina. So
beautiful.
I challenge you all to go out this spring and find your own little ballerina grass.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, there's lots of engaged chatter happening on this thread, so I'll make sure I show you this thread afterwards, Julie. And there's lots of fabulous people growing native grasses and very passionate about them. So this has really been an excellent talk, and looks like people want more. So, but we are going to close up now because we're right on 5 o'clock. And yeah, big thanks to Julie for pulling this all together and inspiring everyone today. And I'm sure you've all learned something about our native grasslands, and everyone's very thankful for your time and your willingness to also follow up and give people advice from here as well. We will send a follow-up email to answer any of those questions that we didn't get to, with a link to the recording to share with your colleagues and friends and family. And you'll also receive an invitation to our next webinar in the series on Tuesday, the 5th of August, which will be Climate Change 101, Understanding Climate Projections Data and How to Use it in Your Decision Making. So thank you once again, and stay warm and dry. See you next time.
Thank you.